Nothing matters more in business than understanding marketing and buyer psychology. Not budgets, not products, not ads, not social media followers, nothing. But how you use marketing psychology really depends on your business. What it really boils down to is how your buyers see the world. In other words, their mental models. This video is a preview of a 90-minute skill session that I ran with my Choice Hacking Pro members, in which I shared the 6 most powerful mental models that shape how your buyers see the world and therefore how they see your marketing, your offers, your price, and your positioning. In this video, I'm going to talk about why understanding mental models is so important in marketing, sales, and business. And I'm going to give you a sneak peek of the first of the 6 mental models that I introduce in the full 90-minute skill session. You can purchase a recording of the full skill session and the link in the description below. Now, this information is priceless, not just in monetary value, but in saving you tons of time and frustration. But because I believe in giving you more than you pay for, you can buy it for only $49. And if you don't know me, I'm Jen Clinehens. I'm the founder and managing director of marketing psychology consultancy Choice Hacking. I offer courses, workshops, skill sessions, one-on-one support, coaching, consulting support, and a community called Choice Hacking Pro. And the aim of Choice Hacking is to help you double your marketing effectiveness so your sales and profit can 2x too by harnessing the power of psychology, behavioral science, and AI. Now, I've worked with some really big brands like McDonald's, AT&T, PepsiCo, Starbucks, Adidas, and a ton more. But these days, I'm focused on helping solo and small businesses use those same marketing psychology principles and strategies that the big brands get, but have to pay millions of dollars every single year to have marketing psychology and behavioral science consultants come in and help them do that. With Choice Hacking, you get the benefit of my knowledge without the high cost. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is a mental model? And I feel like mental model is kind of one of these terms that people throw around quite a bit, but they maybe don't understand exactly what it means or how they can use it in their business. Basically, a mental model is just a psychological framework that helps people understand and respond to information so they can make decisions. They're kind of like a lens through which we interpret the world around us and how we create meaning from what we see. And that meaning creates stories, which in turn drive our emotions and beliefs. So you can see I've tried to make my handwriting as legible as possible. Think of mental models here as a lens in the middle, and you've got different bits of kind of information and data coming in through the world, right? So information in whatever form, maybe you're reading it, maybe it's something that you're seeing around you. Marketing, you could be seeing ads. Research, you could be doing research on your own, and that's playing into all of this. And news and culture, what's happening in the world around you. So this all feeds through the lens of a mental model, and then that turns into meaning and behavior. So I'm going to give you an example from the real world that might make this a little bit clearer. In 2018, Jigsaw, which is a research unit inside of Google, wanted to learn how conspiracy theories spread online. So instead of relying on secondhand research, they decided they wanted to meet and talk with 40 American and British conspiracy theorists. Now, the Jigsaw executives were really shocked by what they learned when they talked to these people, especially when they saw where the conspiracy theorists were getting their information. The conspiracy websites that they trusted were a lot of things, but above all, the executives noticed that these websites were really poorly designed. And here's just an example of something that they might have been looking at. This is, I don't want to say what I'm looking at because YouTube might punish the video. But basically, you can see there's a lot of advertising, there's a lot of moving things, there's a lot of headlines, there's a lot of stuff really competing for my attention. In other words, this is kind of an ugly website. Now, these websites might have been ugly, but they were also clearly persuasive. So, what was going on? Well, these Silicon Valley executives were having a little bit of cognitive dissonance because they had always assumed that these slick, minimalist, beautiful websites were more trustworthy, which is why they spent millions and billions of dollars every single year trying to chase this idea of beautiful design. But in the conspiracy theorists' minds, a well designed site, so everything that the Silicon Valley executives wanted their websites to be, was a sign that the information had been created by the establishment. Now, the establishment was, in their minds, what they were trying to fight. Ugly websites were more persuasive because of what they represented when they were run through these people's mental models, fighting against a mainstream narrative. What you have to know about mental models is that basically Human brains are like story making machines, and mental models help us build those stories. Because the mental models act as those filters for information, so that lens through which all the information moves and then meaning and behavior comes out of the other side, they help our brains figure out which data points are relevant and they build a story from that information. So, for example, let's say that two different people accept a promotion at a different company and a much higher salary. So, person A's mental model about themselves at work goes something like this. And this can be conscious or subconscious, usually subconscious. And they think I've been promoted because I have rare and valuable skills and expertise, and I'm good at learning from data and responding quickly. My new company recognizes that, and they're paying me according to what I deserve and the value that I deliver. Now take person B. Their mental model sounds something like this. I know the boss here, and even though I'm pretty early in my career, my connections have helped me get this far. Even though my skills aren't the best, I managed to talk my way into a promotion far above my abilities. They could probably find someone better qualified for this role, but I was in the right place at the right time and I knew the right people. I got lucky. Now, I'm not saying that these mental models are true or false. We're not judging them in that way, but these are just examples of two different people with two different mental models about how they perform in the work environment. So now imagine that each of these people started their very first project in this new business where they were getting paid a lot more money and had experienced a promotion, and it was a massive failure. Person A might take that project failure as evidence that something in their approach isn't working and they need to tweak their process or systems for this new environment. They still feel that they deserve the promotion and the big salary because learning from mistakes and adapting is part of their skill set. But person B, on the other hand, with a different mental model, might take that project failure as evidence that they're in over their head. They might mentally combust and decide to even quit or leave the job because they don't want to make their friend, the boss, feel like person B is making them look bad. They don't want to risk burning a relationship bridge because they see networking as their core skill and their promotion as luck, timing, and knowing the right people, not inherent or developed abilities. And the last thing you need to know about mental models is that they're a form of context, but they're also context dependent. So, how and which mental models show up really depends on the environment and what's happening around them at the time. So, in other words, the context of a decision or a behavior. The same person can have different mental models for different products or industries or situations. So, for example, someone who's making a decision about which business software to buy might be very risk averse because their job is on the line. If they mess up, they're going to get fired. So imagine this person. Inevitably, they might talk to some newer, like startup brands, might be cheaper and faster, but they're probably going to go with a big, old, established brand for their business software. And in fact, there's a saying about this in the business world that says something like, nobody ever got fired hiring IBM. IBM is a big established company that a ton of people use. If you picked IBM, nobody would blame you if things went wrong because they've been around forever and everybody knows them. And they're a logical, risk free choice. But this same person who is very risk averse in the office environment might go home and scroll on Instagram. They might be happy to take a risk and try a new beard oil from like some sketchy Instagram brand that they've never heard of because the price is low. In this situation, they're less risk averse because the stakes are lower. They won't get fired if they order some beard oil that doesn't quite work, right? At most they're probably out like 20 bucks. But the context in which they're making the information in their home, maybe in the bed scrolling through Instagram late at night is a very different context than sitting in the office looking at very important papers, wearing a suit. Now, there are lots of mental models, possible mental models, more than we could cover in 100 workshops or skill sessions. But in the full skill session, I share the six most powerful for business and marketing. Today, I'm just going to share the first of the six mental models. And these are the six that you really need to know which side of the mental model your particular buyer falls on, because these are going to have a huge impact on how they perceive your marketing and your price, your offers, and the value that you can provide for them. The very first one is risk perception. So, what is the risk adjusted value of a purchase? And again, if you want to purchase the full skill session, the full 90-minute session, there is a link in the description below to do that. So, risk perception. What is risk adjusted value? So, when people make a decision, it is not solely a value versus price decision. What they get for what they spend, in other words. Decisions are made on something called risk adjusted value. So instead of this, where they just think, oh, well, the price is $20. Is it worth $20? Okay, I'll pay $20. They think in terms of this value, $20 minus risk equals the risk adjusted value. Now, let's take the example that we just talked about with the guy in the office, and he's making the decision about the new business software. So, value is important, right? How much you're paying for something. Let's say with a small startup company, you're going to pay $500,000. With IBM, you might pay $4 million. $4 million versus $500,000, if you just take it on its face, it's a no brainer. But there's a lot of risks that comes with working with the startup. Maybe they go out of business in 6 months. Maybe they've never had a company or a client of your size. So they're not sure if the software will scale, or they've only scaled it once and they're pretty sure it'll work, but you never know. Versus IBM, who costs what, 8 times as much, but they've delivered the same software for all of your competitors, businesses that are bigger and smaller than you. They've delivered the same software for over 100 businesses, and they scaled it for 75 of 100 of those. They are much less risky, and that risk or that lack of risk has value. So this is how you get this risk adjusted value. You have to take what you're paying and what it's worth, subtract the risk, and you get risk adjusted value. So the riskier something is, the more potential value it has to provide to balance out that risk. So different types of buyers will weigh risk more or less heavily depending on their role, their industry. Seniority can play into this as well, as in how high they are in the organization, the price of the product or service, and countless other factors. The spectrum of risk tolerance looks a little something like this. You have low tolerance for risk, so these are people who do not want any risk. And then you've got high tolerance for risk. And the differences between these two boil down to a couple of things. So, low tolerance for risk, high price. Maybe I'm paying a lot for something. Ooh, so I want to make sure that it's not too risky because I'm paying so much money. High pressure, maybe it's a big decision. And if you don't make the right decision for the right business software or the right consultant or the right agency or the right coach or whatever it is, it's going to be a big problem. Maybe the business goes out of business if you pick the wrong piece of software. That means you're going to be tolerating a lot less risk. High visibility. So if you're in a big organization, especially, this could be a big deal. If the CEO knows that this guy is trying to pick out the next, piece of business software kit that they need, that's high visibility. And if you mess up, well, the CEO is going to know and he's going to want consequences. Now, high visibility can also be public visibility. Let's say you're bringing on a new piece of business software because you had a big public data breach and your customers are upset and the stock price has gone down. That's high visibility too. Even though, obviously it's high visibility inside of the business or organization, it's also high visibility to everybody in the entire world. And then the last one here is hard to walk back. So, walking back a decision basically means like how easy is it to undo? With something like business software, if this is a big business, they could spend not only millions of dollars on the software, but months and months and millions more getting from one piece of software onto another piece of software, training everyone on how to use it, getting vendors to use different pieces of software. Basically, it becomes very difficult if 6 months into this process, you go, oh, sorry, we made a big mistake. We'll go back to the other stuff. Now you've wasted like hundreds of thousands of man hours and potentially millions of dollars. It's a hard decision to walk back. So there is a very low tolerance for risk. On the other side here, you have a higher tolerance for risk. So obviously, it's the opposite. If something is a lower price purchase, like you're going to have a much higher tolerance for risk if you're ordering a stapler for your office, like one stapler, versus if you're spending $4 million on business software. Lower pressure, a little decision. Nobody cares. Not a big deal. Lower visibility. Nobody's really going to see it if it messes up, so we could take on a lot more risk with that. And then easy to walk back. If something goes wrong, Can I get rid of this new stapler and just use the old stapler? Yeah. So high tolerance for risk versus low tolerance for risk is a little bit of some extreme cases, but you kind of see the difference between the two. Now, it's not just about how risky a brand or a culture in a business is. It's the mental models a person or people in the business have around risk. So, for example, someone in a startup might be more willing to take risks with investor cash because they have the mental model of investor money isn't my money, so I can be less careful with it. Now, just as another person in a similar situation but a different startup might be less willing to take risks with investor cash because they have a different mental model. And that mental model is the most important factor to manage in a startup is financial runway. So, how much money do we have left? So, they want to manage that money very, very carefully because they need as much time as possible to sell the product and get traction and find a lot more customers. That's why it's really important to understand what these mental models are and which one of these your specific buyers hold. It is really, really important to selling through a product or a service or any other thing that you can think of when it comes to you having an offer, marketing, messages, prices, even, and how you're sort of framing all of this and presenting it to potential buyers. So, in the full skill session to help you use mental models to your advantage, I'm going to share my 3 step process that has helped me create more than $250 million in marketing returns, plus more than $10 million in investment for my startup, scale up, and Fortune 500 clients. That link to the full skill session is in the description. Now, what happens in the skill session? The first step, I'm going to give you all 6 of psychological mental models. So we started with one, I'll give you the other 5 that you need to manage marketing, sales, revenue, and profit, illustrated with very clear examples from multiple industries, which is important, so you can see them at work in the real world. The second step, I'm going to give you a checklist and a process for how to quickly spot mental models at work in you or your clients' businesses so you can make quick fixes that start to improve your sales or lead flow and make your marketing twice as effective. And step 3, I'm going to share my framework for researching and testing marketing that speaks directly to these usually subconscious and hidden mental models so you can start searching for them in your own business right away. I'm going to share my step by step approach for realigning your offers, pricing, positioning, and strategy once you've identified these mental models. So it's easy for you to capture that hidden demand in the market. To purchase a recording of the full skill session, you can just check out the link in the description below. If you're not ready to purchase the full skill session, you can also join the 10,000 people who get my free weekly marketing psychology newsletter. These are entrepreneurs, agency owners, consultants, coaches, and even marketers at companies like Google, Coca-Cola, Disney, and many more. You can read it at choicehacking.com/read, or just check out the link in the description below. I'm sensing a trend. Until next time.